Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're doing Cloud Checker's sub-account configurations. I'm Jason Thompson. I'm a Customer Success Manager here at Cloud Checker. I'm joined today by the rest of my team, Richard Whitney, Sarah Smith, and Sydney Brierly, as well as joined by Kurt Jordan, a Technical Account Manager. I will be covering standard configurations for both AWS and Azure Azure accounts, and Kurt will be covering API configurations. So I will get my screen shared here, but to start with, we are assuming that you have already created your payer account and you have turned on automatic account generation. That will hold a billing-only account for all of your sub-accounts. Screen shared now. All right, so I am in the hierarchy view. I'm in my test accounts here. I've selected the account I want. Let me switch over to my AWS account. There we go. So we'll go to Manage Credentials. And we'll be greeted by a page here asking for some different types. We're going to use the role for cross-account access utilizing the cloud formation stack. Now, the key here is that you want to be already logged into your AWS account, the specific account that you are credentialing. If not, I will have you log in, so you just got to make sure you switch to the right account. I'm already logged in, so I'm just going to click the link to launch the cloud formation stack. And you can also copy this link if you happen to have your cloud account open in another browser. You can just right-click and copy the link and paste it into that browser. And you'll be creating the cloud formation stack. Now that we've already done the payer account and all the billing data is already in Cloud Checker, we don't need to change anything here. You don't need to worry about putting in the CUR bucket again. We already have that information. If you are logging CloudTrail to that individual account, you can put that bucket name in here. Otherwise, you can just leave that blank. And you want to acknowledge that CloudFormation is going to create a IAM resource and create the stack. And I already had that stack name, so I'm just going to pop a number on there to end it and create the stack. So this will take about 30 seconds or so. You can refresh up here in the top right to see its progress as it goes along. And what we're ultimately looking for is the ARN, which will be in the Outputs tab. You can also grab this from the role itself if you go to IAM. We'll give it a little bit of time here. That should be just about done. It needs a little bit more time to cook. There we go. Now we've got those creates. We should have an ARN, and we do. So you'll copy this whole ARN, and you'll go back into Cloud Checker, and you will paste it. I have my old one here. Just get rid of that, and paste in the new one. Then you'll click Update, and you're all set. Cloud Checker will now start the ingestion job to do the discovery of all your resources. This will open up security and compliance, inventory reporting, cost savings tab, best practice checks, really opening up Cloud Checker to make sure you're getting the full features. And now we have Azure. Azure's a little different. There's a few more steps involved. The same start where you'll select your account and manage credentials. And let me get the slide deck to match. So, and also to mention that the ingestion will take up to 24 hours. It's going to depend on the size of your account. It could be just 15, 20 minutes. If it's a large account, it could be up to 24 hours. So for Azure. So after we've gone here, we'll go to single subscription, and there will be another drop-down box to collect resource information from your Azure subscription. Now, in my case, my subscription ID isn't already entered. But if you had automatic account generation on and it created the billing only account, this subscription ID will already be filled out for you. All right, so next you'll need to log into your Azure portal. and you'll need to go to Active Directory. And it's also at this point I recommend that you have a notepad open to be able to copy these numbers in. The reason being is that if you're credentialing multiple subscriptions, if they're within the same Active Directory, the same information will apply for those accounts, the numbers that we're going to grab here. So the first thing we need to do is create an app registration for CloudCheckr. All right, so creating app registration, new registration. We'll name it, most of our clients name it CloudCheckr, but you're welcome to call it whatever you like. We'll keep the first option here, the accounts in this organizational directory only. And our redirect URI, we're going to select web and put in HTTP / localhost, and then register. And now that that's done, we have our first set of numbers to copy. First is going to be this application ID. And I recommend you use the copy to clipboard. That way you ensure you don't get any trailing or leading spaces. This can present an error in CloudCheckr if you paste in a blank space. I have my notepad open here. It's my application ID. And the directory or tenant ID. Then we will need to go to certificates and secrets on the left-hand side. And we're going to create a new client secret. So we'll name it. Again, a lot of people just use CloudCheckr, but you're welcome to use whatever you like here. And I'm just going to keep it on 6 months. Add it. And then what we'll need is the secret value. This is only displayed once, so if you don't copy it here and you need it later, you'll have to create a new client secret. You can delete this one, create a new one. And because this is a new subscription for me, I'm just going to grab my subscription ID. All right, and then we are ready to go back to CloudCheckr. So we just fill in the blanks. We have your directory ID, our tenant ID, application ID, and your secret value. And for me, because this is a new subscription, in the wrong place. Correct that. That is something important to check. There we go. Lastly, there is an option to select the account type. So commercial, government, or Germany. This is just commercial for my use. And we'll hit update. And if I copied everything over right, we get a confirmation message, and it will moving over to select what billing type. If this was already connected to a CSP or an MCA, you wouldn't see the screen. You would just be all set because it's pulling it from the payer account. Okay. And then lastly, what we need to do, we need to actually give that app registration a role within the subscription. So we'll go to our subscription, and we'll select Access Control IAM, and we're going to add a new role assignment. So first thing, we'll find the reader role. That'll give just the read-only access. Hit next. And then we'll select members. So we're going to select the app registration we had created. There it is. Select. And then review and assign. And review and assign. And now it is all set. CloudCheckr will now start ingesting the data. And again, up to 24 hours for all that data to be visible in CloudCheckr, may be shorter than that for you. And then just the slide for presenting the credentials. All right, so that covers basic credentialing. Next, I'll hand it off to Kurt.
Thank you, Jason. So I'll be covering, my name is Kurt. I'm one of the technical account managers here, and I'm going to be covering the API credentialing. So some of the reasons you might want to do this is just if you have automation going through, you got accounts that you have a large set of accounts that we need to be able to get credentialed, and going one by one can take a very substantial period of time. So being able to use our APIs to be able to help automate this can help save a lot of time and heartache. So the first thing that we're going to need to do here is making sure that we have our API client that's configured. So from the kebab menu at the top right there, the three dots at the top right, you could select API management. You're going to select create new, and you're going to give it a name. So for my example, I created what's called Kurt's test client, and you save that. Once you save it, you're now going to have your API key ID. Make sure, so just like our user roles, the API keys have the exact same type of roles. So if we wanted to be able to create new clients, new APIs for either yourself or customers, then you can assign different roles based on the permission level that the API access might need. So once we have that, you would click on the new blue button on the right side for the access key. In the same fashion, it's going to show you that secret key once, and you want to make sure that you write that down and save it, because otherwise, if you lose that, you'll have to delete it and create a new access key to be able to work with. So for the AWS Payee API credentialing, I apologize, that's still the same one there. So we're going to go through in using that same API, the CloudFormation stack template. So if you go to the manage accounts, and then from there we have manage credentials, it's going to provide you with the account ID and the external ID, and those are some of the items that we will utilize. The external ID is going to be unique for each one of your payee accounts, and if we're doing a mass credentialing of something larger, such as 100, 200, 300 accounts, in that fashion, I would suggest opening up a support ticket. We can help you create a static external ID to make this credentialing process a lot more easy. And we'll be able to help generate that for you. So if we are working with something in a much larger fashion, instead of creating an IAM role for each individual account, what ends up being a little bit easier is creating a stack set. And you can get this template from that same link that Jason had shown earlier. We have the URL for that JSON template. One thing, I also included the link there on the bottom left for us here. So one of the things to be able to add when we're generating credentialing for a lot of accounts, consistency is key. And to be able to help with predictable ARN naming conventions, what we can add to the properties value is something like cc-i, the role name, cc IAM role. What that's going to do, because normally when you create an IAM role, it's going to have, without this, it'll have a trailing like 8 alphanumeric digits to be able to help with the randomization, because each role needs to have a unique name to it. If we add something like this, though, each subscription will be part of that IAM to be able to help make that more predictable and consistent throughout each one of the roles that are generated on the stack set. So instead of having to try to find and guess each one, we're able to easily work with that. So from our site, developer.cloudchecker.com, so this is our Swagger platform. And what this is a way to be able to test and utilize our APIs on a single use component. You would start with pressing authorize, the green button on the top right, and that client ID and the client secret that you had saved and created earlier, that's what's going to be plugged in here. So you then click authorize on the middle, and you'll be able to start testing any of the APIs. So, and with this Swagger platform, you can always import this for any of your favorite tools, such as Postman or anything of that nature as well. So if you scroll down, we're going to get to the AWS credentials. So we can test the credentialing of the single account that's on here, and you would click try it out, which then unlocks it. You're going to enter your customer ID, your account ID, and then I've also provided an example of the payload that you would input into the object to be able to help credential that account that you need on there. If you need your customer number and the account number, if you're selected it on CMX, you're going to see this in the URL. Your customer number is going to be right behind the customer /, and then the account number is going to be right behind accounts /. So that's going to have the customer ID and the account ID that you would plug in right here. If you did have a large set of accounts, to be able to try to automate this workflow also, the third arrow I have on the right, that's to be able to download the CSV of all of the accounts and the statuses and any additional information. So with that, it's going to be easier to see which accounts you have credentialed or not credentialed and the whole list of account IDs, and being able to sort and filter by ones that we might need to actually get done. So the first column is going to be the actual account IDs. It's labeled as just IDs or ID. And then the last column is going to say whether it's credentialed or not. Usually that's the easiest way for me to be able to help sort those. This way we can automate the credentialing. So a quick example of how we would be able to programmatically credential an account with AWS credentials. So using a few things like the variables like the customer number when we generate the bearer token, which I apologize, I forgot to mention earlier. So when you click authorize on our Swagger portal, that's actually generating a bearer token that is a 60-minute lifespan. So we'll have the bearer token, the account number, the provider ID, and going through, and you can see that payload will loop through, and I'm just changing the provider ID because it makes it a lot more simple to be able to just roll through each one of the accounts that need credentialed as long as we have all that information there. So if we've got accounts that we want to be automatically generated going into the future rather than accounts that we already have that aren't credentialed, AWS Control Tower automation is going to be the best way to be able to accomplish this. So with Control Tower, it utilizes Event Bridge and Lambdas to be able to help pull the information and generate the account configuration while being completely hands-off to anybody that's administrating the account. So if you're in an environment where you have maybe 5 or 6 accounts being added per week, then this is going to be a really good option to make sure that you're not missing any credentialing of any accounts. I've included the AWS link, which you could also Google AWS Control Tower with Cloud Checker, and it should be one of the first things that pops up, but also just make sure I have that link provided here on our documentation. So, and as stated, so this is only applicable to the new accounts, not currently existing accounts on the Cloud Checker side. So it, depending on which route and we're going to take, is going to make sense for which kind of way we want to go about that. So Azure subscription API credentialing is going to be very similar to how we do it with AWS, but we're going to go through the same process that Jason had described, where we make sure that we've got the subscription ID, the Active Directory ID, the application ID, and the secret. So after going through on developer.cloudchecker.com, authorizing, we could scroll down and see that we have Azure credentials and a few options also. So there's the subscription, enterprise agreement, and then request authorization for the CSP side of it. So a few other options. And again, just a programmatic way to be able to look at how we would be able to go through and apply these. So the only thing that ends up changing for applying subscription IDs to multiple accounts is going to be the subscription ID. We could use that same Active Directory ID, the application ID, and the application secret. And that's going to roll through a CSV, for example. So it'll go through line by line on the CSV, be able to help credential these out. And that concludes my side of the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Kurt. So now at this point, we have a Q&A. We already have a question or two lined up here. So the first one being is, how many accounts would you recommend using the API over the manual process in the first demo? So that's really kind of down to how often or how much time you have available to devote to credentialing your accounts, right? So if you're talking, probably 30 would be my personal threshold before I start to engage an API, because it is more work and that does take time to set up, but it makes that credentialing of a large number of accounts significantly easier. If it's just a matter of doing 10, 20 accounts, I would do it manually myself, maybe 10 accounts at a time, something like that, because it only takes 2 to 3 minutes to do. So that'd be my recommendation, like, over 30 or more before I would start to engage an API. Got another question for when would I recommend using Control Tower for credentialing? So our Control Tower integration for AWS is really meant for when you create a new account in AWS for Control Tower to automatically add that into Cloud Checker with all the permissions attached or the role attached. You wouldn't use that for credentialing existing AWS accounts. Control Tower isn't designed to do that. It's just for net new accounts to your AWS. Okay. Give another minute or so here for another question to come in. If not, if you do have questions after the webinar is over, something comes up, you can email us at success@cloudchecker.com. We have that on the next slide. Again, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so for another question to come in.
And Jason, I believe we'll have this as a recording also for anybody that wants to re-reference anything that we said.
Yes, correct. The slides will be out within the next day or so. Sydney, if you're on, do you know when those slides will go out?
Yeah, so anybody who registered, they'll be emailed to you tomorrow. And if you didn't register, if you know someone you want to share it with, those will be posted on the Success Center eventually, probably in the next week.
Yeah, and if you have any questions or need help with this, feel free to send us an email or reach out to your technical account manager, or even our support team. We're all happy to help. There we go, and there's the last slide. So it's customer success at cloudchecker.com. So for any questions. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate everyone who joined. Feel free again to follow up with any questions you may have, or if you have thoughts on future topics, things you'd like to see us cover on these webinars, feel free to let us know. All right. Well, thank you again, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.